Hello everybody and welcome to TechLayer. In this video tutorial we'll see how to set up Kubernetes HA cluster using the kubeadm utility. Now for this setup we require 5 virtual machines, 2 for the master node, 2 for the worker node and 1 for the load balancer. And for the master nodes, we require virtual machines with 2 CPUs and 2 GB of RAM. And for worker and load balancer, we will be using 1 CPU and 2 GB of RAM. That's enough for it. And all our virtual machines will be running on CentOS 7. So we'll be using CentOS 7 for the cluster installation. And if you're using Ubuntu or some Fedora or some other thing, you can follow along with this video. I'll show you where you can, instead of using the CentOS commands, you can also use different commands which are specific for Ubuntu or Fedora. Okay, and in this installation, we will be using Vagrant to automate our virtual machine setup. If you don't want to use Vagrant, if you are not aware what Vagrant is, you can manually configure your virtual machines and that will be fine, but just make sure that all your virtual machines can be connected to each other, they're in the same network. If you want to see how you can use Vagrant, you can follow along this video. And I am not going to deep dive into what Vagrant is, as the topic for this video is for Kubernetes HA cluster. So if you want to follow along using Vagrant, it's a very cool software tool where you can automate your virtual environments, your development environments, and you can set up your virtual machines using this Vagrant. So I have created a Vagrant code which you can go, and from this link, I'll place this link in the description of the video. You can go and download the code from this, and you need to install Vagrant. So you can go to vagrantup.com and you can download it. You can download for specific OS. I am using Windows, so I'll download and install. I've already downloaded and installed Vagrant in my system. So you can just go ahead and you can download this zip, unzip it, and once you are in the folder, you will get the Vagrant file description and the Vagrant. So I'll give a small overview about this file. You can go, if you're using Git Bash, you can open your terminal from here. I'm using VS Code. It's fine if you're using the command prompt or a PowerShell. Just make sure that you navigate to the folder. So once you're in the folder, you can see this Vagrant file. So if I open this Vagrant file, basically what I'm doing is I'm defining the number of nodes which I'll be setting up. I'm defining a start IP, and I'll be setting a private IP for this Kubernetes installation. So basically it's nothing like I'm using CentOS 7 as my operating system for this virtual machine. I'll be naming my virtual machines accordingly, and here is what memory I'll be allocating, what CPUs I'll be allocating to the master node. So this configuration is for the master nodes. I'll set up the host names. I'll be assigning an IP address, a private for this private network, and I'm running some scripts which are present under the scripts directory. So the scripts are nothing but it's just setting the host names according to the virtual machine host names which we are given in this Vagrant file. So this is for your master node, this is for your worker node, and this is for your load balancer. So load balancer, we are basically using this to load balance the kube API which is in your control plane node. So the purpose of load balancer is only to load balance the control plane component, that's the kube API. And for the load balancing, we will be using the Nginx web server to just using the reverse proxy of the Nginx web server. So once you're done, once you're in the directory, it's very simple. Just you can type in the command Vagrant up, and it will take care of everything for you, whatever you have defined in your scripts. So here if you open your VirtualBox, in some time when this starts, you can see that the VMs are getting created one by one. So let's wait for some time. Now this might take some time if you're doing it for the first time, because it will download the CentOS box from the Vagrant and then it will start installing. So if you see, my first virtual machine is being set up, so it will slowly come up all the 5 VMs. So let's wait till this setup is completed. As you can see here, all our 5 virtual machines are up and running. Now I'll show you how you can connect to this virtual machine. So what I'll be using is, I'm having an SSH client known as MobaXterm. You can use whichever SSH client you want to use. The important thing is how you connect to those virtual machines, because you don't have a password at the moment. So for what Vagrant does is, if you go and see the Vagrant folder, inside you'll have a folder known as .vagrant, and inside this you'll have machines, and these are all our, sorry, I'm in the wrong directory. So this is our machines, all 5 machines, and inside these folders, if you go in this VirtualBox folder, you'll have private keys. So we will use these private keys to connect to our SSH to our virtual machines. So I'm using MobaXterm. It's so I find it very cool to use MobaXterm, because in this tool you can multi-execute commands, which is required for this. Not like required, it will make your task easy if you're using MobaXterm or any other similar SSH client. Even if you're using Putty, it should work fine. So in those sessions, what I'll do is, I have already created all the sessions, so I'll just show you one, how you can create it. So create a new session, you can provide the IP address. Now the IP address, if you go and see in our Vagrant file, we have a range of 192.168.30, and our load balancer start IP is 1, and in our configuration what we are doing is the start IP plus the number of nodes we are having. So we are having only one load balancer, so this will be start IP plus 1, so it will be 192.168.30.2. 1 plus 1 is 2. So I'll add it, 192.168.30.2. I'll specify a username, it will be Vagrant default, and under the advanced SSH settings you can click on this use private key, and you can select the private key. Sorry. In the load balancer, make sure you select the correct private key for the correct virtual machine. So this is our load balancer. I'm selecting the private key here. So once it is done, just click OK. Just if this prompts, press yes, and here you're inside your virtual machines, the K8s load balancer, which we have created for load balancing. So you can go ahead and create all your sessions. I have already created it. So one by one we will be using the virtual machines to do the setup. So the first setup, and one more thing is, if you go to this project which I have created for this Vagrant HA cluster, you can find the steps of the installation here. So to minimize our time, instead of typing, we can just copy and paste the commands from here, and we can just do the setup. So what I will do is, I'll connect all the, so first we will be installing the kubeadm utility through which we will do the installation. So for kubeadm, there are some kind of prerequisite like system requirements. You should have any of the following operating systems. We already have CentOS 7. It's the minimum is 2 GB of RAM and 2 or more CPUs, and full network connectivity between each node. So this means that all your workers and all your master nodes should be able to connect with each other. So the first step is, now this step for kubeadm installation will be done on all the master and worker nodes. So what I will do is I'll connect all the master and worker nodes one by one. Now once you are in, I use this multi-exec. So as I want to install it on all the nodes, instead of doing these steps one by one on all virtual machines, I will use multi-window. So once whatever I type in here will be, shared across all the terminals. So I'll clear this. I'll switch to the root user. Now I'm in the root user. Now the first step is you need to load the netfilter module. So I'll just copy and paste this command. To paste this command on all the four, you control shift and insert, or you can use the top right hand side, you have multi-paste. Okay. So the one requirement for kubeadm is you need to turn off the swap. So I'll turn off swap on all the four machines. And to see the bridged traffic, you need to edit your config file to see the bridge traffic. Just copy and paste this command here. Done. Now the fourth important step is we'll be installing the container runtime. So as a requirement of kubeadm for this Kubernetes cluster, you need to have one container runtime installed. We will be using Docker container runtime. So we will be using this command to install our container runtime. So here you can see this will minimize our time if you're using MobiXterm. It's fine if you use any other thing, you can just copy and paste, do this thing one by one on all the nodes if you don't want to use MobiXterm. So here the step is completed. Now we'll move to the next step. Now we'll add the Docker repository for our installation. Let's add it. Now we'll install our container runtime. So this might take some time depending upon the speed of your internet. We'll wait till this setup is done. So now you can see that our installation of the container runtime is completed. I think something I have missed while we were configuring all these virtual machines. Something which I missed you to tell. I think the IP range which we are using is 192.168.30. Now for each it will be different. So for load balancer it will be 30.2 start IP +1. For the master node it will be 30.4 +1, it will be 5. So for first master node it will be 192.168.30.5 and the second master node will be 30.6. Same goes with the worker IP. It will be 30.10 for the first worker node and 30.11 for the second worker node. So here you can also see here in the script it's like 192.68.2 for the load balancer, 6 for the master 2, 10 for the worker 1 and 11 for the worker 2. So make sure you use these IP address when you connect to the virtual machines. So now we will go to our terminal. So now we'll follow along the next step. The next step is we'll create a directory for Docker Daemon, and then we'll set up the daemon for the Docker. And we'll reload the Docker daemon. We will restart Docker and we will enable Docker to start with our system in case of a reboot. So now our container runtime is all installed. Now we'll be installing the kubeadm. So we will enable the repository for kubeadm, and we'll set the SE Linux to in permissive mode. And now we'll install our kubelet, kubeadm, the kubelet, and the kubectl. So let's wait till this is installed. So we are done with our installation. Now we'll enable the kubelet service. It's done. Now our kubeadm setup is complete, and now we'll move to the cluster installation. So for the cluster installation, first we will have to set up our load balancer. So I'll exit the multi-execution mode and I'll open my load balancer node. So first I'll log in with the root. Now for the load balancer, we are using Nginx as a load balancer to load balance our control plane components, means both the master nodes. So we'll first install Nginx. Let's wait till this installation is finished. Now we'll install our Nginx. Now we'll move to the next step. We need to disable SE Linux. So we'll open this file at selinux.conf in our VI editor, and we'll set this as disabled. Just save and exit the file. And after this we need to reboot our server. So just type in reboot. So let's wait till our system is rebooted. Now Nginx is pretty simple. If you are not aware of Nginx, you don't need to worry here. You just need to follow this video. There are just simple steps which you can configure to run Nginx as your TCP load balancer. So don't worry if you are not aware of Nginx. I am also not a master in Nginx. It's just a simple configs which we need to add in our Nginx configuration to make sure this is working fine. So our machine is up again. I'll again log in with the root. Now we have to start the Nginx. So we'll use this command to start the Nginx. Okay, and what we will do is we'll create a separate directory known as tcp.conf for our load balancing of the API server in the control plane. So you can directly add this config inside the Nginx config file, but I want to make sure that this keeps your master config clean, and you can segregate the configuration by creating different directories and different config files. So I'll create this directory first. and I'll add the same directory inside our nginx config file. So the config file is vi, it is etc nginx and the nginx.conf. So at the last, just I'll append this. Here is this is the directory which we have created in the previous step, and we are just telling the nginx config that everything inside this directory with the extension as .conf should be considered to be a config file. So I'll just come out and I'll create a file inside the directory which we have created with the name API conf, and I'll just add this config to here. So basically what we are doing is we are adding our two master node IP addresses and the port on which the Kube API listens. So basically we are just adding these two lines so that any request which is coming on the API server on 6443 should be redirected to this thing. Now by default this is round robin, so if you don't define any algorithm here, it will be round robin. So let me delete these lines. So I'll save and exit. Now once the config is done, you'll have to reload the nginx configuration. Now if you don't see any error, this means that everything, the configuration, everything is fine. You have not done any mistake here. So I'll install this one more utility here, which is known as your netcat, the ncat. So basically just we want to test if the load balancer is working fine. So you just can type in nc-v and the IP or the host name. So this is our host name and your load balancing on 6443. So you should get this message connected to 192. So this means that your load balancer config is working fine. Now the next step is the load balancer configuration is finished, and on any master node we'll have to install the control plane components using the kubeadm. So the command is kubeadm init, and we'll first define the control plane endpoint. So the control plane endpoint will be a load balancer host name or the IP and the port, the 6443 which we defined in our load balancer config. The port we have to put it here. Then we have to select this option to upload all the certificates which the kubeadm will be creating. You can manually create your certificates and skip this option, but for the simplicity I'll just keep this. So our command will be looking something like this. Now you have a control plane endpoint, KHLB. This is the same. Now if you are giving some different host names, make sure you are changing the host name here if you have given some different host name for your load balancer. Second option is upload cert, and the third option is the pod CIDR network. So this pod network CIDR is the range of IP addresses which we will be giving. This is for the container networking interface. So all the pods within all the objects within your Kubernetes cluster, their interconnectivity will be done based on this. So make sure you give a different range, IP range, other than your IP range which you have used for the private network. Now the fourth option is API advertise server. Now this one is not actually required. You can just simply run this and it will be, your control plane components will be installed. But if you are having, suppose, multiple interfaces on your virtual machines, you have different interface cards, you have different interfaces, and you have configured your Kubernetes on a specific network, then you need to define your Kube API advertise address. So our range which we have defined is 192.168.30.5. The 5 we are running it on our first master node, so this will be the IP of our first master node. Whatever node you're running in, make sure this IP address belongs to that node. So I'll just simply copy and paste this, and this might take some time. Please ignore the warnings. So this might take some time to set up your control plane node 1. We are almost done with this. Like after this, there are very small steps which we need to do to just join it. Basically, we are installing the control plane on our master 1, and then again on master node 2 we will just tell the master node 2 to join to the master node 1, and same goes with the worker node. So just wait till this is finished. Now once you have successfully completed, you'll get this message. Make sure that you copy all of this and you keep it aside, because this, and make sure that you don't clear the screen before you copy this, because we will be using these commands to join our workers and master nodes. So the first step is you need to run these commands, not super important. If you want to control your cluster from this particular master node, you can create a kubeconfig file for this. So I'll go ahead and create it. Make sure that you are out of your root user, and you can just simply run this 3 commands. So this will create a directory in your home directory known as .cube. This will copy a config file. This will create a config file with the name config, and we're just giving some permissions. So this is done. Now what you need to do is you need to run this commands. It's already mentioned here. You can join any number of control plane nodes running. So if you want 3 control plane nodes, you can create 1 new control plane node. You can use this to join that control plane node. Now if you see here, you can observe that it's a endpoint of our load balancer IP address. So if everything is working fine, your load balancer is working, this command should not give you any error. So I'll use this command, and I'll do one more modification to this. So just, I have previously told you that in our previous section I've told you that if you have multiple interfaces, you need to mention your advertise address. So if you forget this, it might happen that your kubeadm has picked up any other network interface, the default interface IP address maybe. So we are running on our master 2, so the IP address of our master 2 is 30.6. So I'll just change this, and I'll run this on my master node 2. This needs to be run with the root user. So it will take a couple of minutes for this. In the meantime, you can go to the master node 1 where we have just configured the kubeconfig. We can run in the command kubectl get nodes. So if you see here, our master node is ready. Not ready actually, it is still not ready. It will take some time to change the status for this master node, and once this is done, you will be able to see that there are 2 nodes here. So let's wait till our master node 2 is up. So here you can see we have successfully joined our second master node to the cluster. If you go and type the command again, you should see that our 2 nodes are added, but the status is not ready. So let's move to the next step. So we have added our master, we have done with the step 5. Now step 6 is we will install a container networking interface. So this is required for your interconnect networking of your pods. There are different types of CNI providers for Kubernetes, such as Calico, Flannel, Weave, and some other, I'll be using weave. So you can just simply run this command on your master one. So once it is done, we can again just check the status of the nodes. We will watch over the status. It might take some time to up the nodes, so we'll leave this as it is and we will go to our worker nodes now. And one by one we will join the worker node. So we have make sure that we had already made the note of this. So you can check this one where it is written that you can join any number of worker nodes by running the below as root. So just simply copy this on my first master node, the first worker node and the second worker node. So this won't take much time. So here you can see that our worker node 2 and worker node 1 are also getting added to the cluster. So it will take some time. Let's wait till all the cluster nodes are ready. Here you can see the master 1 is now coming up, the master 2 is now coming up. Now once these two are up, our worker node should also come up. So our master 1 is ready, master 2 is ready. Let's wait for the worker nodes. So now you can see all our nodes are up and running. So both the masters and both the workers are ready. We can run a pod and check if everything is working fine. Our pod is getting created. Seems everything is working fine. So one more thing is, if you want to test that your load balancer is working fine, instead of operating your node from the master 1, you can do the same process. You can apply the same config on your load balancer. So I'll show you how to do it. It's basically just same steps. I'll create a home directory known as .cube. And instead of copying this, I'll go to my master node 1 and I'll check my config file. So just this config file, copy everything from here. Everything, don't miss anything. Just copy this, create a new file under the same directory as config and paste everything. Save and exit. And one more thing is, you need to install the kubectl here. The kubectl utility is not available on the load balancer. So I'll just go to the step where we just created the kubectl, change to the root. Sorry, I missed. Okay. SE Linux is already disabled, so no need for this command. Just we'll run this command. But what I'll do is this: we will just install kubectl. So I'll remove kubelet and kubeadm. So if you see our config file, here you can see that our server is not pointing towards one control plane node. It's pointing towards the load balancer, and internally the step which we did in our load balancer, that anything which you see, any request which is received on this port should be directed to this and this node. So let's see if it is installed. So I'll exit. So this should work fine. Now this is running from a load balancer. So if this is running fine, everything is running fine. The pod which we have created also is running, so our installation is complete. I hope this was informative, and I hope you like this video. If you really like it, please give it a thumbs up. If anything is missed out, or if you didn't understand anything, please feel free to comment on the video. I'll provide the links, everything in the description of the video, and please don't forget to subscribe my channel and hit that bell icon to receive updates whenever I upload a new video. Once again, thanks for watching.